Okay, we can. Good afternoon, everybody. Can we sponsored by the South African Human Rights Commission, the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, National and Northern Cape, and the Faculty of Humanities. Plaatjie is deeply honored and delighted to host with its partners the Human Rights Public Lecture in the month of March on the eve of Human Rights Day tomorrow. As South Africans ready themselves, in particular the residents of Kimberley and the Northern Cape, to celebrate Human Rights Day, as you know, the President is coming tomorrow, I would like to quote Nelson Mandela, who made a similar, an important remark many years ago, 22 years ago, on the 24th of March, almost to the day. He said the following, and I quote, "We now live in a constitutional state based on the protection and promotion of basic human rights, a state in which the protection of human dignity stands supreme, and in which the Constitution guards over such fundamental values as equality, non-racialism, non-sexism, and the rights of all citizens," unquote. With these words, Mandela not only amplified the significance of human rights within a young democracy bolstered by the Bill of Rights, but he also provided a clear pathway and moral compass to current and future leaders to follow and implement. The theme of our public lecture today, as you would know, is in direct alignment with a statement as Professor Mapunya will show later. Ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, it gives me great pleasure to formally acknowledge and welcome in the audience our keynote speaker, Professor Mapunya, Chairperson of the Human Rights Commission, Reverend Chris Nissen, Ms. Mandisa Chikwatamba, who is the Deputy Director General of Corporate Affairs in the National Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, SPU members of MANCO represented by Dr. Kongui, and if there are deans in the faculty, you are most welcome. Colleagues from the South African Human Rights Commission and DSAC, National and the Northern Cape, students, SRC leadership, colleagues, academics, and faculty members, visitors, and my last comment is all protocol observed, if I didn't mention you by name. My name is Russell Viljoen, and on behalf of the organizing committee, comprising of Mr. July, Mr. Speak, Mr. Patrick Letsatsi, I have the immense honor to function as the host and program director of this special public lecture. Just a few housekeeping rules. First of all, this is a non-smoking venue, so you cannot lit your cigarette or anything else in the venue here. The duration of the program is approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes. I would request that all cell phones be put on flight mode, silent, or switch off entirely. The restrooms are indicated on the side of the auditorium. Please follow the signage. And as you can see, the library is still fully functional. So there will be movement by library users as we are flanked on both sides. In case of emergency, the evacuation rules will apply. With these few introductory remarks, I would wish to call on Dr. Kongui to do the welcoming and opening address. Just some brief note on Dr. Kongui. He is a member of SPU Management Committee and Senior Management Team, where he is also the Chief Operating Officer at this university. Dr. Kongui, thank you very much.
I have to take my glasses off when I read. Representatives of DSAC, national and provincial, the chairperson of the South African Human Rights Commission, Reverend Chris Nissen, our keynote speaker, Professor Mapunya, members of the management team, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, our students, our deans, our senior management team, management forum, good afternoon to you all. Good afternoon. It is my honor and privilege to welcome you today on behalf of the Vice Chancellor and Principal of the University, as well as the entire management committee of Plaatjie University. Tomorrow, the the 21st of March, South Africa pauses again to observe Human Rights Day, a day that carries deep and solemn meaning for our nation. It calls us back to Sharpeville, to 1960, to the lives lost in the struggle for the simple dignity of being recognized as a human being. It is a day that reminds us all of how far we have come and how far we still have to go as a nation. It is therefore profoundly fitting that on the eve of this day, we gather here at Plaatjie University, an institution that carries the legacy of Plaatjie, a fearless human rights advocate who devoted his life to the dignity and freedom of his people. His name above our doors is not merely an honor, it is a calling and a responsibility. Today's lecture invites us to reflect on a milestone of great national significance, the Bill of Rights. That cornerstone of our constitutional democracy, the document that enshrined in the clearest possible terms that every person in this country has inherent worth and dignity. This is both a celebration and a moment of honor and honest reckoning. It is an opportunity to ask, are those rights alive in the everyday lives of our country and its people? We gather here at Plaatjie. My apologies. I have no doubt that today's lecture will provoke thoughtful reflection, important debate, and a renewed commitment to the values that bind us as a democratic people. To our speakers and our guests and our visitors, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for gracing this university with your presence. We appreciate you. We look forward to learning from you and to advancing the relationship already established with you going forward into the future. Thank you very much and welcome to Plaatjie University. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kongui, for your words of wisdom and sharing your thoughts on this important occasion on behalf of SPU management and yourself. I now call upon Reverend Chris Nissen, Chairperson of the South African Human Rights Commission, to provide the opening remarks on behalf of the Human Rights Commission, which he leads. As he makes his way to the podium, allow me to read his abridged CV as Commissioner. He's saying no, but I have to do it. Sorry, Reverend. Commissioner Nissen was appointed as a part-time commissioner of the South African Human Rights Commission in January 2018. During his first term at the Human Rights Commission, Commissioner Nissen was responsible for the civil and political rights focus area, as well as responsible for overseeing the National Preventative Mechanism, NPM. In 2023, he was elected to the United Nations Body for Prevention of Torture Worldwide. In January 2024, Reverend Nissen was appointed as a chairperson of the South African Human Rights Commission. As chairperson, Reverend Nissen is the executive authority of the Commission and is also responsible for providing oversight and support to all other focus areas. Chairperson Nissen leads the Commission's interaction with Parliament, specifically the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Constitutional Development. Further, the chairperson also represents the Commission at the domestic and international forums such as the Forum on Institutions Supporting Democracy, the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, and the National Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions. Through these organizations, which is a peer review-based accreditation process, the Commission has maintained status compliance with the Paris principles. And these principles relate to the status of national human rights institutions. This means that the Commission meets the minimum standards that national human rights institutions must meet to be considered credible and operate effectively. Now, something personal about Reverend Nissen. He has been an activist, I see on the website, since his youth. I think since the age of 12. He's like the equivalent of Jesus when Jesus Christ was involved in his spiritual work. He holds a diploma in theology, a BA Honours, and master's degrees from the University of Cape Town. Reverend Nissen, please ascend the podium and address the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Program Director. Good afternoon to my fellow panelists, professors, and DDG, our staff members, and my fellow colleagues from the Human Rights Commission in the Northern Cape, Anthony, July, and Olua here. I just jokingly said to July, I met him in July and March. So thank you to all my colleagues that are here from Uppington, that support us, with my colleague from head office, my PA, Makumalo. Thank you so much, colleagues and friends. I want to first start off by paying tribute to Professor Balim, who started this university. When he was asked to do so, he started off by saying, if I start a university in Kimberley, we went to look for the Sol Plaatjie family. And he decided that we must do this Sol Plaatjie. He went around, he looked for the family, and eventually he said, this is what it is. He wanted the university for people. He wanted the university that can speak to and attract ordinary people and make sure that the face of the Northern Cape is changing. And that's why when I met him a few years ago, many years ago, at this university, I then immediately after this, and I felt here was one of our struggle icons that decided to change the face of the Northern Cape. And one of the things he told me at the time were two things, but one of the things was important. He said to me, there was a study that was done, and I still need to get that study, that 3 out of 10 children under the age of 10 years old are dying in the Northern Cape of hunger. Not malnutrition, not kwashiorkor, hunger. That's what he told me in his office. And I said, let us as the Human Rights Commission in the Northern Cape begin to look at it. The second thing he told me is the indigenous people, the Khoisan language is not recognized. There was an attempt by the Department of Education to do it at Rietvlei and Rimfasmark, but it did not work out. So I want to pay tribute to Professor Balim for what he has done in starting this university. But then I told him, whilst he went to look for the family of Sol Plaatjie, outside Bloemfontein, about 40 kilometers, Kapteinskraalshoek. Kapteinskraalshoek is a Griekwa settlement which was started by the Lutheran Church, where Sol Plaatjie and mother and father are buried. Nobody takes care of it. I spoke to the Premier of the Free State, both past and present, to say, what are you doing about this? There's not even a signage on the N1 that indicates, because not far from the N1, to indicate Sol Plaatjie's parents. Sol Plaatjie was baptized there in the Lutheran Church there. And nobody's bothered. Nobody worries about it. Medi Reko, who was once the premier of the Free State, she was a teacher at that place. And then what happened? The Lutheran Church sold this place to a farmer. And those who originally lived there, including the graveyard, is no longer part of the community. What it is. I wanted to use another word. But you know, that is where I sit today. Tomorrow we're going to not celebrate, commemorate. I don't talk about celebrate human rights, commemorate, because our rights did not fall from the sky. Our rights came because of the sweat, blood, torture, death, and imprisonment. So I'm just giving you this about the Sol Plaatjie. We celebrate Sol Plaatjie, but we cannot look after his legacy and his heritage. Can we start to go, and I invite you students, to go and do a pilgrimage to the place of his father and his mother's burial ground, which nobody looks after. If we cannot look after the graves of our parents, how can we talk about the future? Last week and the week before, I was in Kailicha, and I saw sewage running into a graveyard. Into a graveyard. Now I'm going to Plaatfontein, because Roodepan, there are sewage there is running across the road, where the children, when it's hot, they swim in sewage. So when we talk about where we are and celebrating human rights, let us be honest and open with one another. But it starts with your students. It starts with the academia. When I was a student, our mind was focused on our career. But secondly, our mind was also focused on how do we change society while we're students. Student voices are very important in order to change society. Protests, yes, perfect. But students' minds in intellectual discourse, into discourse that add to change the thinking of our society. How do we change society? And if we can't have that discourse, we just say, I want to be here, I want to have my career, then I'm off. We've never had that privilege because we lived in a time of apartheid where we had to fight our place in society. So I'm appealing to you. We talk about the legacy of 30 years of democracy. In Plaatfontein, and there are 24 towns in your Cape, in the Northern Cape, that have got toilets that are beyond human dignity. Let me tell you one of them. I'm going there now. This old man, old Tata, told me, you know, I eat my own SHIT. I asked him, why, Tata? He says, no, because our toilets are not waterborne. My toilet is it is a toilet, there's water, but it's not waterborne. It's got a semi-septic tank, but I've got a bag that I must put under the nozzle. Your yard to the end of the road where you must put it. And then the bag like open up, and then the solid waste is there. And then he has to put sand over it. And then the chickens come and scratch there and eat from there. And then he has to slaughter a chicken and eat the chicken. That's why he says to me, I eat my own SHRT. We live in the reality, colleagues. As students, when you're this institution which is a knowledge generator, it does not make you only for your career. That knowledge generation that's happening here must change your mindset to say, how do we change society outside? How do we contribute with our knowledge, our energy to change society? The Human Rights Commission in this province, it's a huge province. Madame DDG from the Arts and Culture, I spoke to you earlier on how we have to go to Namakwaland. It's very difficult for you to have, you've got a 2,000-mile, coastline, and from here to Bloemfontein to the Eastern Cape. It's a very huge province that you are in. And Prof, you guys are here looking at a province that a scarce population, but a huge landscaping. So I understand that. But you are students here. And I want to challenge you. Protest within the Constitution, within the Bill of Rights. But you have to stand up and say, we want to do the right thing. Because you come from families, I'm sure. You come from families where I come from. I grew up in Bishop Lavis, a very poor township. And we were kicked out in the 1962 when I was young, a year and a half or 2 years, from the Group Areas Act. We ended up in Bishop Lavis. We lost everything. As the program director said, from the age of 12, I became an activist. I'm still an activist. Sometimes I get told, please respect rules. But how can I respect rules when people are denied their rights? Poverty, inequality, and unemployment. So I want to encourage you to become the best. I know it's human rights, but I want to talk to your students and say, become the best. Do the best, study hard, become the best, and make sure that you will change society while you're a student, also when you become a professional. As the Human Rights Commission in this province, please, we've got a program called Human Rights Ambassadors, and our staff is here. They will guide you through that. If you want to become a human rights ambassador, we are here to accredit you. So when you go to your home, your township, Esladin, you can go and say, Dimlo, I'm a human rights ambassador. So I'm asking you, engage with the commissioners, the commission after this, and please engage them. But thank you so much for the MOU that we have with the University of Plaatjie. Thank you much for the executive, the management, and all of you. Thank you for that engagement. But I want to say to you, I'm going to speak tomorrow. I'm going to raise critical issues. You can't have in this province signage that says potholes ahead. Fix the bloody potholes. But they say signage because somebody has got a contract to do signage. And that signage is saying, we've warned you. Fix the bloody potholes. How can we live? Look at Kimberley. Look at Kimberley. But when you go to the former suburbs, it's okay. But we get into our townships, it's rotten. Sewage are running. There are no streets even in some places. So I'm saying to you as students, become the voice of the voiceless. Become the voice of the poor. and become the voice of those who are not able to articulate the right that they have. Lastly, Program Director, we can't have rights only. Rights will come with responsibilities. So we have rights and responsibilities. So we have two sides of the coin. Rights on this side, responsibilities on the other side. Please go for it. Become the best at this university. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Nissen, for your presence here today. It's we really appreciate it, and it's remarkable, and also your remarks about what you've said to us here today. And the students out there, the challenge has been set. Be the best you can possibly can. Be an activist within the rules of engagement, and be change agents. You have powerful voices, not only powerful voices in terms of sound, but also through actions. Ladies and gentlemen, before I call upon the keynote speaker, Professor Mapunye, I would like to call on Ms. Caesar Nkosi to recite an appropriate poem. Just background on Ms. Nkosi, she is a lecturer in the discipline of creative writing in the Faculty of Humanities. She's also a poet and an accomplished author and writer. I call upon her to come to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof, for the warm welcome. I promise I'll be very short, my dean, and warm greetings to everyone gathered here today. Before I read the poem that I'd like to share, I just wanted to say thank you for actually inviting me to contribute a poetic inquiry to this critical dialogue in 2026, which happens to mark 50 years of the 76 Soweto uprising. It also happens to mark 30 years of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So I just think these are not really just milestones, but a living history that contributes or that continue to shape how we understand dignity, justice, and being. So the poems I chose to read today are from my poetry collection that has a very fundamental question, O Grand Malume. And the first poem is dedicated to my uncles, Mandla and Jabu, who went to exile and never returned. Malum Mandla, I found your children on Facebook, Nomagugu and Temba. We talk now and then, share memories of you, pictures you carried when skipping the country, and the ones we took at your funeral. They were born in exile, still live far from home. We will welcome them one day with a gold smile when history remembers unmarked graves. Remember Brajo? I saw him at a funeral last week. He cried when he saw me, said I remind him of you guys. He said the last time he saw you, Malum Jabu, your face was covered in blood. He thought you were dead. Now let me update you with the news in Dube. Sparks died drunk and broke. Brawandi runs a restaurant and a B&B. Other men are limping and stammering, loitering, raising grandchildren. I'm sure Mdulas took a bath in 1982 when Amabunu hit his head with the back of an AK-47. He walks around with pieces in plastic bags, doesn't have an ID. What can we do? The moon remembers the day you left. When Maponya sold the supermarket to ShopRite, so many spaza shops closed down and the Pakistans took over. It's still rough around Dube Hostel. They bomb ATMs, break into shops. Maketama is still there, still sells meat, but also struggling because of ShopRite. Like the flower shop next to the butchery, flowers shadowed by strands of hair as litter grows from the ground. Most neighbors have extended their houses, 3 bedrooms in a garage. The apricot and peach trees are gone. All we have are broken street lights and street humps. A lot of people you know have died. Mlangeni passed on last year. They gave him a state funeral. The whole army was there. But Joe introduced me to some members. Umshana Gajabu Bob Malilo. Eyes running over me, they attended to their drinks. Can you believe that Tokyo married Ingamla and left Dube? I used to see his mother at the Fatima church every time I attended Mass. Soweto can't afford electricity. People write their names down for food parcels. You loved this country so much, you left it. And what happened to the spear of the nation? I wonder what was written in your letters, a litany of dead or corrupt comrades. All the letters you sent from exile, how did you send them? Because we never received them. I can hear the fridge breathing and a soft soprano sound from outside. I hear mosquitoes buzzing and a heavy silence from these walls. Ama Apollo, moving cars, and neighbors' windows are disturbing the night's glow. The light on the ceiling burdens my eyes. I recall Mom's memory of Malum Jabu coming home. He used to leave a small bottle of umuti outside the gate so the police would only arrive after he had left. I go to the bathroom, lock myself in the mirror, pee and flush, go back to the bedroom, listen to running water fill up the bowl. I light my scented candle, think of all the ones I loved who died. I roll impepo into a stick, watch it smoke fill this old house. I fall on my knees and call my loved ones by their names, but ngiyangingiza when I want to speak to Malum Jabu. What if he's dead? What if he's still alive? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caesar, for that poem, and that comes from my own book, authored by herself. I now call upon the keynote speaker, Professor Mapunye, to deliver his keynote address entitled The Bill of Rights and Human Dignity in South Africa's 30-year democracy journey, a generational reflection and pulse check. As Professor Mapunye will join me in a second, give me a few moments to read his CV. Professor Mapunye is an independent researcher and consultant in democracy, elections, and governance, a retired professor of African politics and former chair of the Department of Political Sciences at UNISA. He is also a former holder of the Wiphold Brigadier Bum Research Chair in Electoral Democracy in Africa at UNISA. The holder of a doctoral degree in government from the University of Essex in the UK, a Master's of Public Administration from the University of Botswana, and a BSc degree, Sociology Honours, University of Zimbabwe, amongst others. Professor Mapunye has worked for the University of the Western Cape School of Government as a lecturer in public administration and governance. He has also conducted commission research for national governments, departments, including the South African presidency, and from 2004 to 2024, he conducted election-related research at the Human Sciences Research Council in Pretoria, worked for South Africa's Department of Public Service and Administration as Director for International Affairs, and for the Electoral Commission as Manager for Research and Knowledge Management. Professor Mapunye recently returned from the USA, where he observed the country's November 2024 elections as in 2024 to 2025 as a Fulbright scholar in residence at Lincoln University, Pennsylvania. During his stay, he taught political science courses and collaborated with US scholars, amongst other activities. His work focuses on election observation and training for election executives and officials in Africa, and commenting on politics in Africa focusing on public administration and management. He's a prolific author and co-author of numerous peer-reviewed academic articles and book chapters. Professor Mapunye, please join us to deliver your keynote address.
The program director, Professor Viljoen, and members of the university, all colleges, students and staff, Dr. Kanguwe, even though it looks like he's not here in his absence, and of course, the chairperson of the Human Rights Commission, Reverend Chris Nissen, in his absence as well, members of the National Office of the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, here present our poet, Ms. Nkosi, and of course, our DDG, Ms. Chikwatamba. I've attended conferences in many parts of West Africa. They normally say, all protocols observed. You know why they say that? Because in the audience, there might be a chief and a bigger chief and a big person that you might not know. So to avoid offending anyone, if they are there, all protocols observed. I recognize you, I see you, even though I might not know your status in life. I've just been warned by the Reverend Nissen that Professor Mapunye, let's get rid of these titles. Unfortunately, I operate in a university setup where these titles are constantly there, whether we try to get rid of them or not. In the 1970s, I think it was 1972, 73, a small boy of about 13 years old was arrested by the South African police, SAP, then. He was selling apples outside a station in Gauteng called Roodepoort. Still there. And there was a white Portuguese cafeteria owner around the corner next to the bus stop where this 13-year-old used to sell his apples. And he was complaining that these black youngsters are stealing, taking my profits, my customers. So the police, you call the police, and of course they come and arrest. So that youngster was arrested. The dogs were set on him at one stage to try and chase him away, and they took the apples, and the rest is, a story that I can tell you next time. And then, no wonder that in 1976, on June the 16th, that very 13-year-old, who was now a little few more years older, got caught up in student politics, and of course, was part of the Soweto uprisings, and you will be hearing more about it, obviously, this year. In 1977, as a result, in September, when Steve Biko was being buried in the Eastern Cape, that very youngster who had been victimized by the police earlier was arrested, trying to go to a funeral. Now, this was during apartheid, where the police were also segregating people according to tribes. You are Zulu, you are Xhosa, you are... So we had these policemen, most of them were from Venda, because the local police were refusing. They were saying they don't want to be involved in fighting the children, killing them, and human rights abuse and so on. So they used to import, quote unquote, from the homelands. You remember some of these homelands were independent, quote unquote. So these police were constantly telling us when they arrested us that, why are you going to attend this man's funeral? You, what language you speak? No, I speak Setswana. You, what language you speak? No, I speak Zulu. You, what speak? I speak Xhosa. You, I speak Afrikaans. And then they said, you amaze us. None of you is Xhosa here. This man is Xhosa. This Tipiko, and you want to go and attend. He said, are you in the habit of attending people's funerals that you don't know? No, you are not supposed. So they said, we are not attending the funeral. Of course, they kept us in jail until, it was buried. I'm mentioning this story because the Reverend says, how do we change society? It's a pity he's not here. How do we change society? And my simple answer is, one step at a time. One very small step at a time. In your own humble way as a student, in your own humble way as a member of a community, in your own humble way as a citizen. I know that this is the so-called graveyard session on a Friday in South Africa. Where's your Hosa Friday? And some people normally sleep, they doze off. I've had lectures on Fridays and most of my students were always sleeping. So please don't sleep. In case you feel that you want to sleep, just stand up for 2-3 minutes and then sit down. Because certainly, if I'm not boring you, then I will not be happy if you are sleeping during my presentation. I am both honored and profoundly grateful for the invitation from the Sol Plaatjie University, which has accorded me, together with the Departments of Sports, Arts and Culture and the Human Rights Commission, the responsibility to stand here today before as we reflect on the milestone in the life of our nation. Now, you might, in spite of the CV, by the way, is more than 30 pages. In America, they said, wow, we've got the 30-page plus CV. It's very long. So what Professor June did, just to summarize. So you might want to know, why was I chosen to present the lecture and this keynote address? I was asking myself, and the simple answer is that I don't know. But perhaps someone recognized my decades-long research, commentary, and policy analysis, community engagements, academic leadership, and advocacy in the areas of democracy, elections, and human rights and governance in Africa, because that's normally what I talk about. Some might know me from election observation across the continent on issues related to democracy and elections. However, very few will know that I was also part of the June 1976 students who this year will be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the June 16 uprisings. We all know that this anniversary underscores their historic fight of the youths and students against the indignities of the apartheid system, which the United Nations General Assembly formally declared a crime against humanity through Resolution 2202 in 1966. I will not say more about myself, as today should actually be reserved for the memory of those who enabled us to celebrate human dignity and human rights in a free South Africa. To many people, a period of 30 years, 1996 to 2026, might seem to be very long, but it is a pertinent timeline for measuring humanity's journey at any historical juncture. The subtitle of my topic refers to a generational reflection and pulse check. When a doctor, a nurse, medical, or other qualified practitioner checks your pulse, what do they seek to find? Except the status of your heart and, by extension, your health. This is what I think we must do regarding the South African Bill of Rights and Constitution. We must reflect as a collective of generations on the achievements, highlights, and obstacles that we have faced as a country in these past 3 decades. Now, let me take you on a journey, a trip that I will be following to help you walk with me in this journey of reflection. I will first grapple with the aims and objectives of the Bill of Rights, locate the essence of human dignity in it, and proceed to assess how generations in South Africa, or generations of South Africans, have understood and sought to apply the concept and practice of human dignity during the country's historical trajectory. In doing so, I will look closely at 3 generations for my assessment. First will be the generation I call the pioneers, quote unquote. These are the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s. Second will be the freedom usherers, quote unquote. Those are my terms that I've just concocted. That is the 1970s, the 1980s, and the 1990s. Finally, I will look at the views and contributions of what is normally called AMA 2000s. That is 2000, 2010, and of course, passing now up until 2030. 30 years ago, South Africa entered a new chapter in its history. The democratic breakthrough of 1994 marked the beginning of a political, moral, and constitutional project that sought to restore the dignity of millions who had been denied it for generations. Hence, of course, my topic is not surprising, but is simply the Bill of Rights and human dignity in South Africa, South Africa's 30-year democracy journey, a generational reflection and pulse check. I went to the dictionary, and the Oxford Thesaurus 1995 defines dignity, among others, as follows: decorum, propriety, worthiness, greatness, importance, self-respect, and worth. Our indigenous languages in this country and across Africa have even richer definitions of the term dignity, borrowing mostly from the Ubuntu philosophy and our vast African indigenous knowledges. As a significant milestone, 30 years is particularly meaningful because in terms of our country's national development and politics, it underscores a full generation, normally 25 to 30 years in political science terms. This means that between 1996 to date, we have had a generation of people who were born into a new democratic era marked by a constitutional order, the observance of human and people's rights, universal suffrage, and adults who behave, think, and relate with others in radically different ways than did previous generations. And that includes me, because some of us never thought we would live to see today, if I have to be honest with you, when we were in the trenches in 1976, challenging such a brutal and determined oppressive regime. That moment of 8th May 1996, when the Constitutional Assembly adopted the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, symbolized not merely a change in government, but a transformation in the very foundations of our society. At the center of this transformation stands one of the most important achievements of our constitutional order, namely the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa and its celebrated and globally acclaimed Bill of Rights. Whenever I talk to people about Bill of Rights, two years ago, I think it was 2023, I was talking to some young students about the Constitution and human rights. They said, but Professor, we cannot eat human rights. Understood. But we are talking about a milestone here. Before, there were no rights completely. And this time they are there. What we need to do to deal with the issues that the Reverend was talking about is perhaps now what we need to be focusing on. The 30th anniversary of South Africa's Constitution and Bill of Rights gives us an appropriate opportunity to re-examine human dignity within a human rights framework that the country adopted in 1996 when it changed from a parliamentary state to a constitutional democracy. At that time, because there was no constitution, Parliament would make decisions and tomorrow they would implement. There's no constitution and there were no rights. So these forced removals and all these things, people being moved from Bloemfontein to wherever, it would happen willy-nilly. Recognizing this fundamental shift, some subsequently dubbed the country a miracle democracy. I put that in quotes. And this document was also called the best constitution in the world. Whether it is indeed the best constitution, in my view, remains a point of intense debate and contention, and the argument among constitutional experts about whether this really is so, given the fact that some of the things that the Reverend was talking about are still there. You still have sewage running in the streets. You still have somebody sleeping hungry. You still have people being killed in police cells. But perhaps it might not be because of apartheid now, but for some other reason, some people are still dying, which we thought would never happen in a democracy. Now, remembering the past and the struggle for dignity. As we remember the past, 3 decades, we must remember that the struggle for dignity in South Africa was and still is a massive undertaking. However, the one intimidating thought that I had over the last few days before coming here was how I would tackle such a mammoth task as unpacking South Africa's human rights framework and human dignity practices, since many would agree that such topics are best given to lawyers, judges, or as they normally call them, our learned friends, and human rights activists. The Reverend said he's a human rights activist, so I would pose that question to him. Who could cite cases upon cases and instances of human rights compliance and violations? I'm not like that. Yet to appreciate the significance of the Bill of Rights, we must first recall the conditions that made it necessary. First, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, they call it the UDHR, scholars of law. The United Nations Charter, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights of 1966, International Treaties and Conventions on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, normally called the CEDAW or the CEDAW, some would call it, of 1979, the Conventions Against Torture, 1984, the Conventions on the Rights of the Child, 1989, and on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And for the continent of Africa, many among such instruments, we can list the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, 1981, the Protocol to the African Charter on the Rights of Women, 2003, and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, 1990. These are just recent. But obviously, we can see that South Africa takes a cue from the international ones. Now, we must cite all these legal and international instruments or agreements, not only because South Africa has ratified them since the dawn of democracy in 1994. If I pause there, before, South Africa could not ratify any of these. Why? Because it was under apartheid, and it was denying many of these rights, right? But mainly because they all seek to protect human dignity globally. Most important, however, the issue is not how many laws and agreements on human rights our country has signed and ratified, but whether and how far we are domesticating or internalizing the spirit and letter of these legal instruments. I made to pause there to tell you that there are technicalities here. If you have been in an international situation such as I was, whenever you try to talk about these things, they ask you, has your government endorsed this law? It's a term on its own. It's a technical one. Then some ask, has the government signed? Some ask, has your government ratified? These are steps that are followed. So if you do not endorse, you do not sign, you do not ratify, then therefore you cannot domesticate. And therefore you cannot claim to be a human rights, dedicated state. Right? So we have to be aware about those technicalities at the international level. And this might be one of the stumbling blocks why we have some of the problems that we have. Because we endorse, we sign, we ratify, but we domesticate. Human dignity is recognized in international law as the foundation, not the cornerstone of human rights. Thus, Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that, quote, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, close quote. While the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights of 1966 protects dignity through such clauses on liberty, life, fair trial, and freedom from torture, when it states that, quote, all human rights derive from the inherent dignity of the human person. Those police who arrested me in 1972, these things did not apply. There's no human rights. You bundle a 13-year-old into the police van, set dogs on him, and the dogs are biting him. Where's the dignity there? It's not there. As if taking a cue from this treaty, Article 10 of South Africa's Bill of Rights declares that everyone has inherent dignity and the right to have their dignity respected and protected. You can check it because I know they told me that some of you are part of the thumb generation. You check things as we speak. You just check with AI. It will tell you. Human dignity is essentially about respecting the worth of every person. Simply explained, human dignity is, in quotes, the inviolable worth present for every human being, regardless of their status, nationality, and orientation. According to the literature on human rights and the judicialization and implementation of human rights, the UDHR, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, was pivotal in popularizing the use of dignity or human rights dignity in human rights discourse. Since we are reminded that the application of this term while being universally applicable like all other human rights, is equally context-specific. So it applies to a context. It goes without saying that the fulfillment of human dignity in South Africa and the rest of Africa is confronted by complex issues ranging from social, economic, legal, political, historical, and cultural, among other issues. In Africa, there are many positive values in African cultures, but some of our traditional norms and values conflict with human dignity and the fulfillment of human rights. For example, the patriarchal basis of community and society regarding issues such as corporal punishment. In some parts, when you go to Africa, they'll tell you, no, but you must use the rod, otherwise you spare the child. So others will tell you that, no, this is not how we treat women here because they, in this society here, they are second or third in status. So it is the patriarchy and the cultural, things. And of course, even when they talk about things like GBV, for instance, we often hear when we are trying to address this GBV, in the same sentence, women and children. How many of you have heard that? Women and children. It sounds like an innocent, but women are normally put with children. And hence now, when it comes to the rod for the child, the woman must also follow suit, if you follow the logic. And this is also in official pronouncements and documents. The disrespect of other official languages and the dependence of women on male relatives, all these things are the things that we can single out. The stigma against persons with disabilities, persons accused of witchcraft in some provinces, and those living with HIV and AIDS remains a vexing issue, a troubling issue. In some of our communities, cultural norms discourage victims from openly criticizing GBV and rape, arguing that by doing so, it might just undermine culture and tradition or humiliate the affected relatives or families. Believe you me, I've been there, where a family member chose to go a different way because I dared to challenge this thing. So it's a painful issue. This inevitably, in my view, allows domestic abuse and GBV to continue unchecked. So now you understand, you've got the laws, but somebody somewhere says, we don't do it this way here. Politically, human dignity is regarded as one of the foundational principles upon which modern constitutional democracies rest. Such constitutional states normally emphasize that every individual possesses an inherent worth that their state must recognize, respect, and protect. After the Second World War, 1945 onwards, human dignity became a central feature in national constitutions and international law to prevent the rise of authoritarianism and protect personal autonomy, largely following the rise of regimes such as Hitler's in Germany. Incidentally, the term authoritarianism, together with others like dictatorship, despotism, autocracy, tyranny, absolutism, totalitarian, people, if it was in the old class, my first years would be saying, Professor Mapunye, that is heavy. Where do you get these bombastics? These bombastics simply mean that there is inherently no human rights culture in that kind of government. Okay? Fortunately, we don't have that, or at least we profess that we are not part of these isms that I'm mentioning here. Before 1994, South Africa was governed by apartheid, a system that institutionalized racial hierarchy and stripped most citizens of their basic rights. Under apartheid, dignity was systematically violated as people were classified by race, as I mentioned earlier. Families were forcibly removed from their homes and political participation restricted to a privileged minority. The struggle against apartheid was therefore not only a political struggle, it was fundamentally a struggle for human dignity, in my view, which has in no way ended on the 27th of April, 1994. That's where the reference point comes in. That how do we change society? You don't change society on the 27th April, give people a constitution, say, yeah, you are free now. Just like those students of mine, master's, PhD, I said, today you are a PhD. Your title is now going to change to doctor so-and-so. You now have a master of this. It doesn't mean that you are now going to take this certificate and put it underneath your pillow. actually you need to leave the certificate in order to become a real doctor that has learned all whatever you have learned. So similarly, the onus is also on us as South Africans. We have a constitution, but the question is, do we want to domesticate it? To go back to my previous point. In my view, the journey towards attaining this goal is still very long. Briefly about the birth of constitutional democracy. When democracy arrived in 1994, South Africa faced a monumental challenge. How do we build a society that would never again allow the abuses in the past? Question mark. The answer lay in constitutionalism. So we thought, let's come up with a constitution, right? The constitution adopted in 1996 became one of the most progressive in the world because it had almost everything that many countries are crying for. All right, they say, oh, South Africa, you have it. Even in the United States, they were telling me, you people, your constitution is the best. And I say, wait, before you start praising us, we've got issues in South Africa. Let me tell you, of course, I was sharing them with them, what I'm sharing with you now. At its core lies the Bill of Rights of this constitution, which affirms the values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. Importantly, the Bill of Rights recognizes not only civil and political rights, but also social and economic rights such as housing, healthcare, education, and social security. The key challenge to such a constitutional order, however, is to protect the country from relapsing into the old ways. Very easy to relapse. 30 years is nothing. Some countries have travel even shorter. 25 years, they relapse, they go back to their own. There's a military coup, and this soldier takes over. He says, I am citizens of country so-and-so. I am Lieutenant General so-and-so. I would like to tell you that as of today, the 20th of March, 2026, I've just taken over. The airports and places of departure, ports are closed until further notice. And your constitution is suspended with immediate effect. All the former ministers of the former government must hand themselves to the nearest police station to be arrested and tried. We have not gone through that, South Africans. We should still pride ourselves that we are fortunate to be still associated with human rights. Globally, in terms of conceptualization of human rights, according to one scholar, human dignity should be viewed as, among others, dignity. It should be regarded as related to national liberation. It should be regarded as an appropriate limit and self-discrimination on freedom of speech. It should be regarded as grounding basis for protecting the honor of citizens. And it should also be regarded as guarding the individual reputation and duties to the community as well as our rights. This is where you and I come in as individual citizens. In other words, even if you have voted, you have just voted, it doesn't mean that you have to rest for 5 years and not hold the government accountable. You must still mention the things that you think matter in your neighborhood, in your area. Now, the same scholar also argues that despite its relative prominence in the history of ideas, it was not until the first half of the 20th century, however, that dignity began to enter a legal and particularly constitutional and international legal discourse in any particularly systematic way. At this juncture, South Africans should be aware of the influence of the German constitution in crafting ours, right? Because some people think that we just woke up and we had all these wonderful ideas. They don't know that our constitution makers had to go to many of these countries, to Europe, to Germany, to into the rest of Africa, Australia, to be able to come up with what we have. But the question is, what about African culture? This is where our Ubuntu, Boto, or African philosophy comes in. In Africa, human dignity in the Ubuntu philosophy and Africanist sense is defined not as an individualist right, which is what most of the constitutional scholars are saying, but as an inherent quality realized through communal relationships and ethical behavior. We therefore normally say a person is a person through other people. I'm sure you have heard that. This underscores, among others, relational issues, interdependence, reciprocity, restorative justice. We know that the TRC, Truth and Reconciliation Commission case is still going right now. Some people believe that they have not achieved dignity. For as long as the poet, you don't know where your brother is, maybe the TRC would have answers for that. There are others of my schoolmates who have disappeared. We never saw them from 1976 till today. I'm one of the lucky ones, right? And of course, there's also spiritual ontological context. The debate among scholars, experts, and policymakers is currently about whether human rights and human dignity are related or different concepts. Some might say it's a semantic issue. Some argue that the two concepts should not be confused as they are quite distinct notions. In Africa, especially when you are sitting here, like I said, you are hungry, who cares? You are hungry. So they are trying to contextualize, to unpack this human dignity. But at the end of the day, it boils down to the basics. There are violations of human dignity. Throughout the world, violations of human dignity have happened for many centuries. In South Africa, we know too well what violation of human dignity means because of our country's history of slavery, colonialism, racial segregation, and of course, apartheid. Globally, the following deeds and practices undermine human dignity in many ways, which also applies to our country, by the way. Torture, especially of prisoners, still happening, but we try to hide some of these things, which humiliates and violates the human dignity of those people who are incarcerated. Disrespect, humiliation, which undermines the dignity of several individuals and groups such as the elderly. Where I was in some of these other countries, I've seen how they reserve certain spaces in the public space for the elderly, for the disabled, persons with disability. Sometimes in our country, we don't. You get into a taxi, that's it. Ndoda zibonela, you see to finish how you get in there with your crutches and everything, right? And it is not just the elderly, persons with disability, marginalized communities that you heard about from the Reverend, and of course, orphans and vulnerable children and the weak in society. We still have a role towards all these people. We also have broken and dilapidated houses in our neighborhoods, schools, potholed roads, you heard about them, no power or electricity, in neighborhoods. We've heard about tima, switch on, switch off, that kind of situation for individuals and families. Substandard or no services at all, especially resulting in overflowing sewage, hospitals without medicines and with poor service, and the list goes on. But the one that is closer to my heart, because when I was doing research for my study, I came to this province. It was about the role of the public service in the transformation of South Africa, but of course, looking at the implementation of the new policies of affirmative action based on race, disability, and gender, right? So public servants who are rude to the public, I met many of them. Because you introduce yourself, I'm a PhD student from where they say, hey, we don't have that time for public students for PhD here. But 10 years, 20 years down the line, I'm back again in Kimberley. And I wish I can go to that department and say, do you remember me 10 years ago, 15? You said you didn't want to give me space to talk to your DDG or DG, but now here I am, all right? So that is very, very painful. Because they are supposed to be serving the people with dignity, but they don't. Public servants who demand bribes for services which the public is not supposed to pay for. But we know. Somebody was telling me that, Professor Mapunye, you have lived too long in Cape Town. I was in Soweto, and I was telling them that, no, look, if I get arrested here, obviously I have to go and pay this fine. They said, no, we don't pay the fine here, the bribe. I said, in what way? How do I, if I'm arrested? They said, no, you choco. Some will know that what choco means. Choco is the 20 rands, Yeah, you move around with choco, 3 or 4 chocks, which means 80 rands. And then when they stop, you give them 1 chalk. If they don't want the first chalk, you give them the second one, and until the chocolate is, sufficient, then there's no ticket, all right? And I said, but this is illegal. This is illegal. But they're like, this is your country, There are no medicines. You go to the hospital. Somebody told me that some people come from some other countries, they take medicine in the hospitals around Kimberley, they cross the border somewhere to go and sell them. I don't know. You have to deal with these issues. That undermines the dignity of those people who are supposed to get these medicines. Police who demand payment or bribe for policing services, they should be rendering for free. And the list goes on, obviously. These violations of human dignity in South Africa should not be viewed in isolation because they are linked to what is sometimes regarded as a clash between African indigenous or customary laws and Roman Dutch law or English law. For instance, in African communities, when someone is seen stealing a goat, the community would call that person a thief. especially if that person was caught red-handed with the goat. Yet in terms of Western law, such a person normally is deemed or called a suspect. For African communities, such a person should not be called a suspect, but a thief because of the evidence the community would have seen and strongly believe that this person deserves appropriate punishment. You see the clash? And however, according to Western law, which has informed much of our constitutional laws, once quote-unquote insufficient evidence is associated with such a person, the law demands that the person must be released and declared innocent. Imagine GBV, imagine rape. This is why communities now just go out in haywire when something like this happens. Likewise, we have had in the past 30 years similar blind spots regarding births and deaths, marriage, widowhood, and other cultural aspects which are normally seen differently by Western lenses and African indigenous law on the other side. What are the changes that we need to restore human dignity in South Africa? As the cliche goes, action speaks louder than words. Therefore, we need more action to avoid the rhetoric in terms of our laws and policy regarding dignity. This means we must change our behavior to align with the Constitution. However, we must make sure that this requires a collective action. We need to continue education, and I'm glad that I'm speaking at Plaatjie University, one of the universities of the nation, sensitizing them about the importance of upholding human rights and dignity in terms of the law in South Africa, human rights law. To do so, we need a mindset shift in line with what the legendary Jamaican singer Bob Marley has called emancipating oneself from mental slavery. He says, none but ourselves will free our mind. So we are free in terms of human rights and the lexicon and the Bill of Rights. But here, we remain in chains. This means changing our attitudes, even when we deal with, now this is where I get into trouble with many people, when we deal with people whom we feel do not deserve to be treated with human dignity, such as offenders or criminals. I know there's a debate raging out there to say, well, if they're in jail, they must stay there, they must face the harsh conditions. There's no dignity that they are supposed to be accorded because they have offended society. The same applies with foreigners, as we call them, right? Or other categories of people we dislike. Pretending to ignore human rights, the human rights of such people, is not helpful at all. We know the story about the LGBTQI communities. Previously in apartheid, the state pretended that these people did not exist. And obviously they were facing the harshest conditions. After we say we acknowledge that they are there, but still we are going back to our cultural spaces that I talked about. You say, he's my relative, but she is my relative, but, you see? So pretending to ignore these human rights that they exist is not going to help us in consolidating human rights culture in South Africa. If we are serious about human dignity in South Africa, we must challenge the indignities wherever they surface. 1998, just like I was in this province doing my PhD research, I went to KZN. I was told in Nongoma, this used to be the old days when there was fighting, and that province was governed by the IFP, the Inkatha Freedom Party. So when I came there, they asked me, so what are you going to talk about? What are you researching? I said, no, I'm researching democracy. They said, yes, you're going to get into trouble with Inkatha here. Here, we don't talk about these things here. You are really going to get into trouble. But my supervisor, PhD supervisor, said, you must stick to that questionnaire as if your life depends on it. So what I'm asking here in the Northern Cape, what I'm asking in the Northwest, what I'm asking in Gauteng, I'm also asking in KZN. So I asked, and then before I knew it, somebody tipped me, some people are looking for you because they say there's this person who's busy talking the language of the enemy. The enemy then was, of course, they were fighting against the ANC, if you remember. But I was not neither. I was just asking questions about, democracy and so on. Similarly, in Pietermaritzburg, at the taxi, I was coming from Cape Town. I come into this bus stop. As a student, obviously, your budget is minimal. So I had to use taxis to move around. I get to this taxi station. There's an Indian lady staying there, Asian lady sitting there. And I say to her, excuse me, ma'am, it's too noisy in this taxi and you are alone. Oof, oof, oof. Where's the taxi driver? Why don't you call these people to come and, switch off the volume? The lady looks at me, she says, you are not from here, are you? I said, yeah, I'm from Cape Town. She says, oh, please, you better be safe because here, the taxi drivers carry guns here. And we dare not ask questions because now, once they come here, and we tell them to lower the volume, they might just offload you, or worse still, you might just be shot. Foolhardy of me, blind militancy as I was, same spirit as the Reverend. I said, no, this is injustice. I have to stand for dignity. The taxi driver comes and says, sorry, but please, man, hey, can you lower the volume? It's just too high. The guy looks at me, he gives me this, what do you say in Africa, fail cake. A very nasty look, as if to tell me that you're not supposed to tell me what I'm doing in my taxi. But the message was driven. He managed to lower it. The lady was looking at me. She was panicking. On the way, she says, by the way, you are very brave. We don't say these things here. Now, what did I say when I started with this lecture? I said, one step at a time. That taxi man will never, ever play, because those are customers, all right? The loud music. So we must remind even government officials at all levels, whether it is municipal, provincial, and national, about the importance of always respecting the human dignity of all their clients or customers. One day in 2010, when I broke my leg, I tried to call an ambulance. It went through to this hospital that shall remain unnamed. I got through to somebody who said, yeah, I'm the sister in charge here. I said, please, I need an ambulance. I broke my, he said, hey, Puti, please, wait, you are talking too loud. What is your ID number? I said, call the number quickly. He said, no, it's too fast. Start slowly, Puti, please. I said, ma'am, I'm in pain. I need an ambulance. In the end, I just have to cast the call because she was telling me, hey, Puti, by the way, you called at the right time. This is tea time, and I'm supposed to be going for tea. I just happened to be passing here, and I answered your call by mistake. And this is a very big hospital. Sorry, this ambulance, then I just cut. And I called my wife, who had to call a colleague at the thing because she was not able to drive to come and take me to the hospital. You see what I'm talking about? Those are the things. That's the dignity that obviously, when you have a situation like this, at any level of government, is disappointing. I'm not saying all the public servants are like that, because there are those who are really doing an honest work. But during my research, I came across lots and lots of horrors, including the so-called ghost workers. I'm given a register of the department is 250. I said, okay, of the 250 random sampling, I want to do 100. They said, no, these names are not there. I said, no, but they're part, we are still doing an audit, but they are not there. But are they earning? They are in the system of earning payroll. That means some people are getting money of these names. You see, so sometimes as a researcher, you discover things that will get you into trouble. Undoubtedly, 30 years later, we must acknowledge the remarkable achievements of South Africa's democratic order, as I keep emphasizing, the death penalty, which many used to criticize during apartheid as the foremost affront to human dignity and an illegitimate instrument to settle the state's contradictions against the majority vulnerable citizens and communities in the country, is no more. All right? That's one of the things that some of us who know that people used to be, they would hang you and then they would say, well, it was a mistake. We hanged the wrong person. But where's the person now? We don't know whether he's in, paradise or heaven or wherever, but the person is gone because now you can't undo. And this is one of the follies of the death penalty where the state has the right to take somebody else's life. When I was coming here, I put on my head, which says the right to life. For me, that right is the most important of them all. Because if I did not have the right to life, maybe I would not be here, would I? Talking to you about human dignity. The stand and cake. During apartheid, whenever something is happening, as students will be going to try and see what's happening. Before you know it, there's a police van, it comes, they arrest everybody there. You are arrested on the basis of stand and cake, literally standing and looking. Why are you looking? When you get that side, they charge you that you are loitering and standing cake. And then you have to spend a night in the cell. You said, no, but just look at this. Yeah, what were you looking? It was a protest about what? And then you realize, oh, I'm in apartheid. I can't say it was a protest against the killing of Steve Biko. You say, well, yeah, I was just looking. Yeah, because you don't want further charges. Because if you say Steve Biko, then they say, okay, 3 more nights. So that kind of harassment of persons in communities, being arrested and so on in public, those things are not there. Some of us are enjoying them. But you might miss them depending on which generation you are. You might say, well, it doesn't mean anything. Politically, South Africa has established a functioning constitutional democracy, according to the scholars and people from outside the country who study these things, including the policymakers, including regular, free and fair, credible elections. By the way, these terms that I'm making are a luxury to some countries. Some countries hold elections that are a shame. We call them electoral authoritarian states. They do go through the motions, but before you know it, the despot is back and is governing again. He says, what did you say? You thought you'd take me out through the ballot, because they have managed to stuff the ballot box in the evening when people are sleeping at midnight. So we have to be grateful that ours so far, at least, are still deemed credible, free and fair by the international observers, all right? We also have independent courts and vibrant civil society. Socially, millions of South Africa who were once excluded from citizenship now participate fully in the life of the nation. Fully in some instances, but not all. Religiously and culturally, the country has embraced diversity, protecting the freedom of individuals and communities to practice their beliefs without fear. But we have an unfinished work on human dignity. The Reverend said, and I also say, reflection requires honesty. Overall, while the first and second generations, 1940s, 50s, 60s, and the 1970s to 1990s, might be happy about the relative achievements of the right to dignity among other human rights, and that political freedom has been achieved, economic justice remains elusive for many South Africans. As for the AMA 2000s, such achievements might be found wanting or even woefully inadequate. For what good is the right to human dignity and other rights, such as the rights to free speech, free expression, especially, etc., when nobody has a job or a roof over their head? Inequality remains the highest. The international system, World Bank and others, United Nations, they keep reminding us. It remains the best, the highest Gini coefficient, that the standard that measures poverty and inequality. And we continue to struggle with unemployment, poverty, and limited opportunities. We have informal settlements that continue to expand, and many communities face inadequate access to basic services. So the Bill of Rights promises dignity, yet dignity cannot flourish where structural inequality persists. What are the rights of universities such as SPU, Plaatjie University? Universities occupy a special place in democratic journey. Institutions of higher learning are not only the centers of knowledge production, but spaces where critical thinking and democratic debate are cultivated. Students represent a generation that did not experience apartheid directly, yet they inherit both the legacy and its injustices and the freedoms that emerged from that struggle. An intergenerational conversation, in my view, is therefore warranted and should be a regular feature of recognizing or commemorating, as the Reverend said. I'm also commemorating, I'm not celebrating, commemorating days like human rights. A 30-year reflection inevitably raises questions about generational perspectives, and the first generation of democracy focused on political liberation and constitutional democracy. The transformation generation, or the current generation, increasingly focuses on economic justice, access to opportunity, and social equality. Future generations will judge whether the promise of the Bill of Rights translated into lived realities. And of course, we do face moral dimensions beyond politics, beyond law, human dignity, and the spiritual dimension. We can debate that. The road ahead, South Africa enters the next phase of democratic journey. The challenge is clear. We must move from constitutional promise to social reality. This requires strengthening institutions, fighting corruption, which, by the way, around 1998, when I was doing my research, telling some government officials, sadly, that, look, I suspect there's corruption. They said, no, professor, no, why must you be talking about negative things? This is a free democracy. There will never be corruption in South Africa. Now, 2026, we are acknowledging that there is corruption. But the Mapunye that was there was vilified. All right? So sometimes it's a question of not shooting the messenger, but listen to the messenger. Because I was doing my research and I smelled the red that things were not right. But they said, no, you are just too alarmist. You are too radical. You are too militant. All right? So this requires strengthening the institutions of fighting corruption, expanding economic opportunity, and investing in education, which is what I think we are doing by establishing universities such as SPU, skills, modern technological advances, and innovation. Out there, it's not just AI. There's technology, and other advances. We need to go there if ever we believe that we will be able to sustain the society. Democracy is not a destination. It is a continuous process of renewal. But we cannot undertake this renewal without recourse to dignity. Nor can we sit around complaining and asking for handouts, not doing our parts, and to ensure the success of such renewal. In conclusion, I'm sure you've been waiting for that phrase. Eh? In conclusion, a keynote address is supposed to do at least one of two things. Number one, provide a hole through which we can look into the future through this keyhole. Number two, provide a slot to unlock the door to meaningful discussion, dialogue, and conversation. If my address has not achieved any of these two goals, then I surrender and will apologize to all three generations that might be present here or listening elsewhere that I told you about in my presentation, that I would have failed. But therein ends my journey of reflection. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mapunye, for your thought-provoking lecture and your personal journey, almost seeing South African history through your eyes and through your experiences. Colleagues and students, are there any questions you'd like to pose to Professor Mapunye? I think we can probably take probably 4 questions from the floor, and then we can wrap up. Yes? Microphone. The microphone's somewhere around here. Okay, we have one question. Is there another hand? Okay.
Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you.
My name is Mlamu Litapu. I have 2 questions for Prof. Come again? Oh. My name is Mlamu Litapu, and I have 2 questions for Prof. The first one is, can we have human rights and constitutional order in a neo-colonial society? Because what had happened in 1994 was not a shift from apartheid to democracy, but it was the suspension of the revolution. That is the first aspect. Secondly, what are the ideological and the philosophical implications of changing Sharpeville Langanyanga massacre to Human Rights Day? Those are my questions at a philosophical level.
Thank you very much. Okay. Prof. Mapunye, will you take 1 or 2 and all you answer? Okay. Caesar, is that? Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Prof, for your keynote. Oh, Stan. Okay. I just wanted to find out what your thoughts are about the dignity of Nje people, the ordinary, and the dead. You know, we spoke about earlier, Reverend was talking about Saul Plaatjie's parents' graves. We look at what's happening to Robert Sobuko's grave, which was vandalized not long ago. Do you think it matters that the people lived and died?
Thank you. Okay. Prof. Popino, would you?
I'll throw one myself. I would like to throw one
Oh,
myself.
okay.
Yes. Greetings, Professor Mapunye. I also work for the South African Human Rights Commission, by the way, but I'm asking this question as a citizen who actually grew up during apartheid itself. I happen to have also voted in 1994. It may not look like that, but I did. Often, Prof, I want to hear your views, just expressed by people who actually lived in these two dispensations. Now, there are those that would like to believe that life under apartheid was really, really worse. Worse as it may be, somehow people survived. We survived. And you never go to bed on an empty stomach. And with what we have witnessed in our country since 1994, corruption. The level of arrogance by public servants, as you say, and the high life by our leaders, what would you make of that? Would you blame someone who, in the face of what is happening, would say life was much better under apartheid? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Prof. Popino, would you like to speak from there or would you come to the podium? Up to you.
One, two, I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Let me start with the difficult one, Mlamli. Yeah, those for me are the difficult ones. You have asked very difficult questions that would normally be a subject of a full lecture, But suffice to say that in a neo-colonial state, there are human rights, but it depends obviously on the regime that is in power. The human rights that will be there will be liberal rights. By the way, because I was trying to avoid giving that 2, 3, 4 hour lecture, I've edited out the ideological, philosophical issues such as liberalism, because the Constitution of South Africa borrowed very much from a liberal democracy and liberal democratic states, the West in all its facets, whether it's the UK, Germany, Austria, you name it. If you check how this constitution, the consultations were done, you will see that our leaders, when they were crafting it, they consulted. Even in African countries, they went to the so-called Anglophone countries like Botswana, Nigeria, you name it, Francophone countries, Senegal, checking to see, but what is there in the constitutions of these people that we can borrow? So, apart from that aspect of nitpicking, checking, the fundamental basis is of that neo-colonial state is that the human rights regime will reflect a liberal ideological foundation. So that we should not shy away from. And in fact, we should also acknowledge in similar vein that unlike other countries that have achieved freedom, democracy, liberation, whatever you call it, through the barrel of the gun, ours came through negotiation, if you remember. So it was a negotiated settlement which brings in the liberal agenda that many people in the liberation movements, including the students of Soweto, the people of Sharpeville, and the others who survived, were very critical about. That we don't want a neo-colonial state. Why don't we want a neo-colonial state? Some of you who might want to pursue the topic will have to read Kwame Nkrumah's Neo-Colonialism. It's a very thick book. It tells you what kind of a state it is. It's colonialism of the new type, It's a new one. It's a dissatisfactory state if what you were fighting against was the colonialists. They leave, they go back to Paris, they go to France, they go to Germany, or you name it. But then they come through that back door and say, sign here. You will be the face. You've got the flag independent, you have the flag, you have the national anthem, but we will give you the money and we'll control the purse strings and we'll tell you where we invest. These diamonds are not yours, actually. We will send them to go and clean them somewhere and polish them. You will only just make sure that you give us space to dig. So that's a neo-colonial state. So I don't know whether that answers you, Mlamli, but the human rights that you have, it is based on that compromise. And perhaps maybe this is why we are struggling, because just when we are thinking that we want to go a step further, far-reaching, moving from a flag independence and the national anthem, obviously that came through compromise, to go towards emancipation. We don't have emancipation right now. We have a problem because of this neo-colonialism. So I don't know whether that answers you, but that is, my response to that, your first question. The massacres in Sharpeville. I'm one of those people who believes that actually it was a mistake for not recognizing the names of those massacres, those historical incidents and everything that have happened in the past, to give them what is called a spade a spade. I normally get into trouble when I'm talking to other people that in politics we must just call a spade, not a spade a big spoon. I'm talking about things like this. Because you have Sharpeville Day, now you change it, it becomes Human Rights Day. It is watered down, it is a little bit modified. And then, in fact, it seems that we want to hide the fact that more than 60 people, brutally perished in that Sharpeville. The same applies to Soweto. Some of us who were there in 1976, we still believe that, if you ask me, I talk about June 16, 1976. I talk about Soweto Day. Yes, the calendar says it's a youth day. But when you say youth day, it's not the same thing as what I've gone through. You see? So, Mlamli, I don't know, but the ideological and philosophical, basis of changing these names, it is a disappointment in my view for those who perished and who thought that they would be getting due acknowledgement 3 generations, 4 generations, 5 generations after they would have, died. Have they died in vain when we now say, no, it's not Soweto Day, it's the Youth Day now. And we don't want to hear about that Soweto Day. It looks like that's what you are saying. I'm not saying that this is what they're saying, but that's the impression that I get. And I also sometimes have a problem with that. Unfortunately, it is part and parcel of a democratic society. You must debate, you must argue, you must put your what is this? Your gripes on the table, and of course you will be voted in or voted out depending on how the wind, in which side direction the vote, the wind blows. So I don't know whether that answers you, Mlamli. Our poet, does it matter not to recognize the historical, places where our heroes have passed on? Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe, may his soul rest. People that some of whom we may not even know about. Obviously, the simple answer is that it will be a disgrace for us not to feel that it matters. It will be like spitting on their graves. We have to make sure that we remember, and we cannot forget. One of the things about history is that even if you try to cover it, it will still keep resurfacing. You can't cover it, all right? Some of us, we're being told Bantu education, and this is one of the things we're fighting against. Being told that before 1652, when the Dutch were arriving at the Cape, they came in 3 ships, which there used to be a cane put around it. This was during the heydays of corporal punishment, that we must memorize the names of these ships. Goede Hoop, Dromedaris, Reiger. Even if you can wake him up at 2 a.m. and say, what are the 3 ships that brought them? I'll rattle them off because of the cane, all right? And then we suddenly realized, no, hang on, this is road learning, because we were told that the people who were in these ships were dying of scurvy. So we asked Emenier, what do you mean by scurvy? They said, no, it's that disease that you get when you don't have fresh fruit and vegetables. and meat, you know. I said, oh, okay. So these people were dying, most of them were dying or suffering from scurvy when they arrived at the KPS. And then after about a couple of months, we were told, no, then they started to have, they had tracts of land. And this land, you know, now the Xhosas were fighting against them, and the Khoisan were also fighting against them. And the Khoisan and the Xhosa were stealing the land of these people. Then we said, okay, hang on a minute. Remember you said they were dying of scurvy, no meat. That means they didn't, did they bring any cattle from Europe? No, there were no cattle. Oh, okay. So now, how come now they had cattle now? And the teacher was, some of you know Serafina. I don't really like the movie because it's got some other, you know, Hollywood issues. But sometimes it's true, some lines where the principal says, and the teacher says, you children will get me into trouble. Our teacher told us that exactly. He said, please, Mapunye, stick to the official syllabus. I'm telling you this thing, the 3 ships, and these people were dying of scurvy, and the Xhosa and the Khoisan were stealing the cattle. That's it. If you want any other thing, we can close the syllabus. You can ask me after class, after school, outside the school grounds. I will explain more. And of course, the teacher did explain. And then we realized that we had 2 syllabuses. Okay, so the dignity, now, there was no Sobugwe in the syllabus. So why don't we bring Sobugwe? Why don't we change and tell the truth in the new syllabus? Especially in a new university like Plaatjie University. All right? I'm expecting that. So that then those people would not have died in vain. And of course, by the way, in other parts of the world, people respect the cemeteries. They are so clean. Oh, there's no vandalism of the graves. There's no desecration. Now I know we've got now people they go there, they take these and they are going to go and sell them so they can buy it to get more high. You know? But really, we as Africans, as South Africans, we can do better. So it matters. It matters that we recognize those, monuments, and where they are not there, we should erect them. Yeah, I know that currently in the country there's a controversy around, hey, do we need new monuments? There is a controversy. My colleague from the Human Rights Commission who voted in 1994, do you have human dignity because you voted in 1994? Remember some people boycotted 1994, you know. There are some people who didn't vote, but you voted. So I don't know whether you have had human dignity, you believe that you have human dignity. But to answer you, the worst corruption, will it be fair if somebody says that it was better during apartheid than now? In my classes, I've had this script. We have discussed with the students all over the show wherever I've been, even audiences. And I normally say, it is better to compare apples with apples. Don't compare an apple with a banana. Or don't compare an apple with an apartheid. Or apple with an orange. Because apartheid was a brutal system, like I mentioned in my speech, declared so by the international bodies, such as the United Nations in 1966, a crime against humanity, all right? This regime here that you have, neo-colonialist as it might be, Mlamli, it does not fit there, all right? It's got the rights, it's trying to make sure that the likes of Mapunye, even, let me tell you something, some of my political scientist colleagues in other parts of Africa have told me, hey, Prof. Mapunye, man, you are so lucky. You speak so freely in South Africa, you are able to criticize the government and tell them that, they are wrong here. With me, I know jail will be waiting for me. I won't mention the countries because I'm still hoping to go back there, you see. But it is tough, I can tell you. They are so scared. They close the doors. They said, Prof. Mapunye, let's close the doors first. Yeah, you see this regime here, it is not, it is a neo-colonialist regime, and in fact, it is, brutalizing the people here, and there's corruption. But these are the things I cannot talk about there because they'll arrest me, all right? 2017, I was in Uganda observing some elections. They shut down the internet whilst we were still doing the counting. And then, of course, we could not communicate with our families in South Africa and elsewhere. And then, of course, with other observers in the field to say, look, what do you see? Before we knew it, the head of, the main opposition leader was arrested. Guess what? By the time when the election official results were announced, I had already told my colleagues, I said, you know something, the incumbent is going to win. Because in Africa, normally when you're incumbent, you are already 5, 10, 15 steps ahead. So the incumbent is going to win. And of course, the incumbent was the, Yoweri Museveni, the current leader, who has just won again this year. I don't know, for the 7th time. So I told my colleagues, I said, I'm not even looking at my, how my voting stations, the ones that I observed have done, because this guy is going to win. In my view, it's not fair because the opposition leader is in jail. Of course, when they announced in the morning, the internet was, opened, and of course, it was announced that, the incumbent had won. All right. So I would not compare this regime with apartheid. Okay. But I would compare it with another democratic society, maybe Botswana, maybe somewhere else, and say, okay, right, these are two democracies, they vote, they do elections, blah, blah, blah. Pound for pound, which one is better? But you know what? So many of our brothers and sisters in the continent have always said, man, the reason why we always want to come here running away from brutality is because you are having this human rights regime in spite of the problems that you say you are having. You are much more better off. You are much more better off because we end up in jail. We end up having to run away from rebels, M23 somewhere in Congo, DRC, you name it. People, there's guns and roses all over the continent. When you are traveling the continent, you know that you are like holding your stomach because you know anything might happen that threatens your life. So far, so good in South Africa. Of course, I should have told you the story of Thandiso Mazwai. Nizlibele, you have forgotten where you come from. You have forgotten where you come from. And Letambulu, not yet Uhuru. It's not yet Uhuru because we are not satisfied with what we want. If you were to ask the people of my generation of 1976, are you happy that you have resolved everything in education and Afrikaans? They will tell you no. Afrikaans was just a trigger point. We said we are not going to speak Afrikaans, especially if they are teaching it in mathematics, physics, and chemistry. I saw myself failing from being a class A students to now struggling with D, because now suddenly I'm thinking, hey, Veskende. And then we said, no, this thing is not going to fly. We have got to challenge this thing, and when we did. But education, is it free and fair? Is it acceptable? It's still part and parcel of, a select few. There's NSFAS. Some of people don't get NSFAS. Some of the people get it through the back door, or there's a party political, the thing that is making sure that some people are going to get it. All right? So I don't know whether that answers you in terms of whether the high life that we see the leaders leading and the corruption can be compared with the situation in apartheid. It is a neo-colonialist system, but I suppose in Ghana there's a novel. Some of you who read these novels, like the ones of Wole Soyinka and Chinua Achebe and so on. It's Aikwe Arma, for those who care to know. The novel is called The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born. When I was coming here, I was just really thinking that the beautiful ones are not yet born in South Africa. Maybe the 3 generations I was talking about must first fizzle off. A new generation that is going to come, not tainted by anything, any legacy. Yeah. I don't know whether that answers you, but those are my responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there perhaps another burning question that will keep you awake tonight and tomorrow, even if it don't get asked or answered at the back there? And perhaps one more after that. Okay, two more questions quickly. There's 1, 2, 3, and that will be would be the last set of questions. Thank you. If it can be just succinct, and Prof. Mapune can respond. Thank you.
Let me first recognize the Department of Arts and Culture for organizing this event. Quite telling. No any other place would have been better than Plaatjie University. Thank you very much, Prof, for that thought-provoking presentation that you did. Perhaps my entry point, Prof, is for you to touch on generational mission. I'll request that. My reasons are very simple. You outlined nicely the era of your Mandelas, how we came to be where we are. And there is a temptation, Prof, that some of us will say, but this constitution sold. The leaders of that time sold, without appreciating what they were going through during that time. The question is your generational mission. What is your mission as a generation now? You can't blame Mandela for Nyaupe. Nyaupe was not there during his time. There was no even social media. You can't blame him. The question is your generational mission. What is it? Are you poor, innocent victims? Or you want to be VIPs of your generation? Prof, yesterday I visited, and it's for the very first time that I come to this university. Not because of the beautiful buildings, because of the historical mission of this university. I visited the big hall there. Prof, it's an attraction, a tourist attraction. There were Chinese and so on. What were they talking about? They were asking that under that water, is there still diamonds? That's what they were asking. And they were explaining that, yes, they are still. But Prof, just as you walk, there is a plaque that says, this plaque, we've put it in remembrance and recognition of the Barolong who died digging here. It's just a plaque, nothing. And one would expect that there will be a Isivavani, just a place where they say, as an African, what is your culture when you remember those who have departed? We take snuff. They haven't done that. Go and check. The generational mission I'm talking about is these ones. Prof, they're expected to take the baton and not to drop it. The generation of Mandela went through a particular process in time. Our generation, Prof, went through a particular process in time. When I say our generation, I'm including me. I was a student activist, the president of universities. We started SAU SRC, South African Universities, as I was the president. It was not fashionable by that time to be a student leader. You know, your journey was jail, you had lekker getrap, and so forth. So that's why we appreciate what we see today. But I don't think you do appreciate that. I don't think so. Black SRCs were outlawed during our times. We have to form them during the night, under the dark and so forth. But look how nice the situation is. So, Prof, I think that's what I'm just touching on you. All these problems that I'm talking about. I have been in China, Prof. I'm not educated, but it is, of course, in a 10. In China, when we went there, we said we know China to be like this, ideologically, as the colleagues were saying. It's like this and this. Go and read Xi Jinping volume 4. Now he has produced volume 5. I think volume 6 is coming. He will tell you that in the passage of time, that's what he said in 2003 when he was addressing the Communist Party. He said, you can't be an island from the global island, but you should not lose your ideological orientation because of your own challenges. And that's what Prof said. When he said, let's adjust these things to also fit us. Then what happened? There is a line they say, China is still a communist country with its own characteristics. So what they did, they look what is the environment. They say, but what dictates our own environment? And then they adjusted that so that they have, I mean, China has more than 1.6 billion people. It's not easy to keep such peace and harmony in that country. But because of that ideological orientation that Prof correctly so quoted Bob Marley in that, the ideological orientation. Prof, maybe let me tell the students that TikTok that we like very much, it's not as innocent as they think. It has been just purchased by a company that is associated to Israel, to Trump, right? And that's what we like, right? CNN, it's in the market now. And those same companies, the Warner Brothers, are going to buy it. And that's where we rely for our information, right? Konamanje parents are no longer playing a role. We get our information from the media. So that is the ideological orientation, Prof, that we owe. You go to Africa, everyone in Africa is looking to go south. Go and check, starting from Egypt. Every young one, when we travel, they say, if I can find myself in South Africa. But we in South Africa, we should doom. We see everything bad. But then you must ask yourself, if South Africa is such bad, why is everyone there coming here? That should be what you should ask yourself. Okay. But two, what is happening? So maybe, Prof, if you can touch on the issue of your generational mission, I'll be happy. I can sit with them for the whole night to talk about things.
Thank you, sir. Okay, question, and then 1 year in the middle, and then we need to wrap up. Thank you, colleagues. No long, just a quick question, if you don't mind.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon.
I forgot to introduce myself. They asked me. Yeah. My name is William. I'm the spokesperson of this country.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon.
Prof. I have had. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. My name is Mr. Jim, the chairperson of the Communal Property Association in Plaatfontein. So we are actually people who are from Angola, Namibia, Botswana to South Africa. Originally from South Africa. And according to the history, when Van Riebeeck arrived at the Cape in 1652, there were already certain groups of people living along the coast of the Indian Ocean and in the interior of South Africa. That's where the Khoi, the San, and the African. So today, I want to know if we, the San or the Khoi, really do have this so-called human right. And when you go to Plaatfontein, you will see the houses where we are living in. That is not a house, if we are human, and if we have that right. And also, we are not recognized. Our leadership, our traditional leadership are not recognized. Maybe if they be recognized, maybe things will go well for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think I had one question there. Then Prof. Mapunya can respond. Thank you.
Good day. My name is Ohlon Nomolal. I'm a student at SPU. So my question is, I've had a good insight about human rights today. So we all have rights, but do you know the responsibility that comes with those rights? And also my question is with regards to the human rights program. So if there's a vacant area, and then people turn it to make it a dumping site, and then later say they want the right to have a better environment, how can the human rights program aim to teach people to prevent contradicting their rights? That's my question.
Thank you very much. Prof. Mapunya, can you respond? Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. The first question, I should say, Mr. Baloyi, right, spoke like an SRC leader to another student SRC leader. We need to share notes, you and I, because what you were saying is exactly what I experienced. Yeah, it's not just the torture, the arrest. There's also a question of not sleeping at your home. I was in trouble with my family because they thought I was misbehaving outside there. But the question is, the police were on my trail, and once you are arrested, you might not come back from wherever you've been detained. And in 1977, on the 19th of October, as some of you might see, the journalists or people in the media space normally commemorate that day. It was called Black Wednesday. Black Wednesday because more than 19 black organizations were banned, including the very same organization that I belong to, which was the Soweto Students Representative Council. And the following day, the horror of being told you are illegal, you cannot function because now you are banned. And the banning orders were terrible, I can tell you. If you are arrested having anything that says something about that organization, you are going far. It's a point of no return. So I do appreciate what you are saying. And in fact, yours, even though you said it as a question, yours is actually a contribution about us in this hall, in this generation, in this country, in this province, and in this continent, to identify our generational mission. Some of you might know Amilcar Cabral, you know, that each and every generation has got a specific mission. You know the quotation. It's obviously always cited. So it depends on you to say, as students of Sol Plaatjie University, a new university with new ideas and new energy and so on, new vision, what do you see as your generational mission? Obviously, it doesn't mean that you are relinquishing the responsibilities of the previous generation, many of whom are still alive. I mean, the Reverend Nissen was here also, you know. They are still here, these people. They are able to advise us. But we need to sit down to say, okay, right, TikTok, is it contributing in any way towards, sustainable democracy, sustainable rights, and of course, the emancipation that we so much are looking for eventually in terms of South Africa? Will it take us into the future? You know, what about this AI, you know? Some of the American students I was teaching, they would say, you always want us to write down. We want to be writing these assignments at home so that you can use AI. I said, no, I know about this AI story of yours. Some of the things want you to think out of the box. And of course, I gave them Bob Marley's thing that you need to think about emancipating your mind first, all right? So it's about that generational mission, which obviously we can sit down and identify as generations. We are not going to give to you on a silver platter and say, your mission is sustainable development. Your mission is what? You need to decide what you think needs to be done, especially when we say, a luta continua. The struggle continues. In whatever form. It might not necessarily be bombs and AK-47s or Molotov cocktails during or petrol bombs during my student days. But it is another way of making yourself heard and making a positive contribution to society. So the generational mission that we are talking about and that my colleague is talking about is obviously to identify the issues that you think are very troublesome to your thinking and to what you think other people before you wanted to do. I was telling you about the story of Afrikaans and Bantu education. That Bantu Afrikaans was removed, stroke of a pen, but we still said, no, it's not just Bantu Afrikaans, there's Bantu education. And then this Bantu education is linked to apartheid. And this apartheid is linked to capitalism. And then that's why they were killing us. They used to say that these children are LSU, they're so dangerous. Because they are 13, 14, 15, and their thinking is like university students, all right? So I leave it to you there in terms of your generational mission. Mr. Jim, when I was in Botswana, just a short story, Prof. At a conference, I met these two white women. I thought they were from South Africa because I didn't know where they were coming from, but they were coming from Canada. And they called me to the side there because I was talking to some other people at the conference. They said, my colleague and I, well, they were saying, I could hear them. They were saying, it's him. Other one said, no, it's not him. It's him. It's not him. And then one says, we are very sorry to do this, but we have just come back from overseas, from Canada, and we saw this movie, and we saw this gentleman whose children got lost in the desert. And my colleague here says, you are the main character in that movie. You know the movie I'm talking about, eh? Some of you are not. For those who want me to give it to you straight, it's called The Ghost Must Be Crazy. So they thought I was that gentleman. And then, of course, I had to politely say, no, but actually it's not me. They said, but you look like the gentleman. This is why, when you talk about the story of the Khoisan, especially the marginalized indigenous communities, it's at the heart. It's one of the things that whenever Letambulu says, not yet Uhuru, I think about that community. Because I believe that we are dropping the ball. We are forgetting that this struggle here is not just about a few selected people, but it's actually about everyone, especially those on whose land we are sitting right now. And the story of people who come into a house, another one occupying the dining room, and the other one at the kitchen. First, you inviting them in because it's cold or it's raining outside, then they come in, and then before you know it, the other one is taking over the kitchen, the other one taking over the dining room, and before you know it, they are pushing you out of your house, completely, not even in the garage, outside of your homestead. It is the story of the Khoisan. That language, of course, I know here it's a difficult issue. In Plaatfontein, I know about the struggles of the people there. And of course, your question, do the people in Plaatfontein and the Khoisan people have human rights? I would say yes, they do have human rights in as far as it covers everyone. But domesticating it up to the level of Plaatfontein, up to the level of the Kue and those other communities whom we try to include in terms of voting, education right. I know the Kue Dam is included somewhere whenever they're doing voter education, and the Kunkwesa, the Ku communities also. But it is a drop in the ocean. I mean, Oma Katrina's story, I don't even have to bore you with it. It comes from now time to time on TV. One language that is left to die. You see? So where are the human rights? So, Mr. Jim, I do understand exactly your pain, and I wish the Reverend was here because he'll be able to have to answer, from their own perspectives. He has gone there, obviously he's going to be going through. It's a difficult thing, but the recognition is a formal recognition. But the domestication is what we struggle with. If you take out the money, you see a strange language. Some of us don't even know how to pronounce that, let alone what it means. We need a translation. And yet, the people whose language it is there on the money are forgotten. Or we are forgetting, or we only remember them when it's March 21 or whatever. So we must not do that. And then maybe going to the last question. What are our rights and responsibilities? This one is also something that I always try to counterbalance, that we should talk about rights. My right to this, my right to that, my right to this, my right. But there's also my responsibility. I have a responsibility to make sure that this country becomes what I would like it to be and for future generations to be. So I couldn't agree with you more. We have got to make sure that people should not build informal settlements inside a dumping, One airport, I was sitting there, people were busy smoking. And then I went to this police, well, not policeman, security. I said, policeman, those people there, you say this airport, there's no smoking. But people are smoking there, and I can't, look, my tears are coming out of my eyes. And he says, say, have you ever been able to, you haven't been able to read the sign up there? It says smoking zone. So we have to talk to the people on the ground who don't have a place, who would like to have to set up an informal settlement. That please talk to the people in the municipality before you start setting up an informal settlement in the dump site or in Dolomite or where there's dangerous chemicals. I know it's for communities, they just see empty land and they want to go and build. But sometimes we are better off looking at the scientific, approach, such that the responsibilities are also to us to be able to educate our communities to say, okay, right, we can see that you are homeless, you don't have a place to stay, but how about we talk to this municipality, they move you elsewhere. I know it's a tall order. I've been there. Municipalities. I've worked with some of them who told me that no, those people don't say they don't want to move, even though the place is prone to flooding and floods, and in places like Hixke in Gauteng, every year people are dying, but they don't want to move. They say, yeah, this is where we sell our things next to this river, and the river is overflowing with sewage. So it's about constant education about the rights and the responsibilities. I don't know whether that answers you, but Prof, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
For this.
Thank you, colleague. Just 2 more items ago. Ms. Nkosi, can you just quickly come up to the podium and read the short poem? And then I would ask Ms. Mandisa Chikwa Tamba to prepare herself to do the closing remarks and vote of thanks.
Thank you, Prof. And the last poem is just as a way to remind ourselves that, this notion of human being actually for us in our African spirituality and understanding, it's the same status of godliness. So this one is for Menoputo Manunga. Menoputo Manunga, a Kunsen healer from Angola, lived in Plaatjie. Her home divided into 3 sections, a main sitting area and 2 bedrooms. Bedroom 1 had an old Department of Sports, Arts and Culture branded curtain door. Bedroom 2, a dirty white cloth rolled and tied into a knot. All the windows were broken, walls painted in black smoke, floors felt thick and sticky with the residue of fire. What can't be used to start a fire in this village? Menoputo Manunga was 103 years old when I met her. She told me about a little girl who used to make dolls from mud. Now this mud doll maker couldn't bear children. Her spirit guides told her to pour water into the soil, mix it till it smells like rain, shape it into a baby, and place it in a green hut to dry. The next morning, she heard a little baby cry. Thank you.
Ms. Mandisa? Yes, Bob?
Good afternoon to everyone. Let me start with the item that has been whispered to me quickly in case I forget it, because it's responding to a need that has been expressed here in terms of a similar dialogue in Plaatfontein. I can signal that that is already in plans. We are planning that. Okay, I thought there's something with my mic. I hope I'm audible. Let me start by just indicating, following what I've just announced now, that as part of my remarks and as part of the vote of thanks, I've found the order different from what is on the program, that I want to start with the vote of thanks. And then thereafter, I do remarks, and you will understand why. Vote of thanks, it goes by just indicating to you that this is a lecture amongst lectures that we are having across the country. This is a lecture amongst lectures that we are planning to enrich them in different ways. And one of those ways of enriching these lectures is about getting closer to this generation that I see here today in the majority. But we are not forgetting that this generation needs to be enriched, empowered, because this is a baton by the 4 generations. So part of our plans include intergenerational dialogues. So for this, I must say that in arranging this dialogue, this is part of us as the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, part of us coming up with efforts and initiatives to promote social cohesion and to ensure that we understand the identity of our institutions and how relevant they are for us so that we know how to engage these institutions. So for that reason, we approach various institutions when we are leading and coordinating these dialogues. So I'm trying to say these are not just the Department of Sport and Arts and Culture dialogues. These are national dialogues. These are societal dialogues. These are community dialogues. These are family dialogues. So when you leave from a place like this, the expectation is that that which you have heard, you have to spread it in the different spaces where you are. So for this reason, I must say that I am thankful, firstly, for what the department, starting with, has allowed us as the department, because the department has different hierarchical levels of authority. As much as we are one department, we can think about something in the same department, but that is not allowed. But in this instance, it has been allowed that we are here. It has been allowed that we be anywhere else that we still have to be and where we have been yesterday, pushing these discussions. And I must say that we have been allowed as well to engage with various stakeholders. And we have also decided, as those who are leading this program, to say, perhaps to just strengthen the visibility of these dialogues, let them piggyback our celebration or commemoration of our national days, in addition to something else that we will be doing as finding spaces and places to hold these dialogues. So coming here to Plaatjie University, I must indicate that we are as well in the process of doing what I've already mentioned as what we do, follow other role players and get to understand what they are doing. So coming here to Plaatjie, we have realized that there was already an initiative between the South African Human Rights Commission and the university to do something close to what I've already said that we are doing. And therefore, to avoid duplications, but to help one another and to strengthen the discourse, we decided to be part of the same. So on that note, I just want to say thank you to the South African Human Rights Commission, the office here in the Northern Cape, of course, starting with the office in Pretoria. And I want to say thank you to the university, the Plaatjie University, especially the Department of Humanities that has shown leadership and accessibility and presence in guiding this program in the professional manner in which it has become. I also want to say thank you as well to the university, but I have been given specific names to mention at Human Rights Commission as planners for this event. Mr. Buisile July, who is in front of me, but I know behind him and aside him and as he moves forward, there is a team of leadership that included Mfundisi Nissen, who has been with us. But the same in the university, the leadership has been Prof. Felion. I think I've read some books from Prof. Felion. I must double check, is it the same person? And of course, Ms. Lindbergh, who is providing assistance. But the The department provincially, I'm not sure if somebody managed to creep in who has not been the person that we were expecting, because sometimes we swap roles in what we do. It could be that someone else than whom we were expecting has crept in, but I do want to confirm that provincially, the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture has been working with us on this. And of course, if they are not here, you may appreciate that they are hosting a bigger event tomorrow, so something could have just come through. And of course, when we are here, they know that they are represented. But I also want to say thank you to the community at large in terms of community representation. When I see Prof. Mapunye, I see a good stakeholder that I can look at and say various communities through him have been represented, having had his bio. He can represent many. But I want to say to the student community here, thank you very much for embracing this event. And of course, I never forget to say thank you to my team, the direct team that I work with, as the team from DSEC. I have mentioned names, so I'm compelled at least to name one person there and say that's Mr. Patrick Litsatsi, who is leading these dialogues. And of course, my Mr. James Matueng, he follows us and captures these stories. And we think that through the work that he's doing, we have more to do and more to report on what we have done. But all media present, or media people present, I see them. Thank you very much for being with us, capturing these stories. Then going back to the reason why I said I want to say vote of thanks before and say a specific message as a part of the closing remarks to this university. Firstly, this university, it has been mentioned how it came to be. So I want to say, clap hands for yourselves as the leadership of this university. And I'm saying clap hands for yourselves because we didn't have to come here with a very serious imvuselelo because we found you already trying to do something and we just got to that. But the message as a closing remarks message, it's a homework message. We cannot be here and you are not left with something tangible to say what is it that we are supposed to process. And I am saying this after the vote of thanks because what I am going to say, it comes from the speakers that have been before me. But all I am doing, I am going to my own speech and what the speakers have said, but without reading my speech as the department that has led this dialogue. I want to confirm areas where I think there is resonance and therefore there are points for homework for this university. Firstly, this has been the day of a reminder about our legacy and the legacy that where we obtain the foundations of this legacy. This has been the day for us to be reminded about our Bill of Rights and our Constitution, which has been very well unpacked for us. But the message in that has been to say, how do we then defend this legacy? How do we then defend what is enshrined in the Bill of Rights? So as you continue with your discussions, these are the points I'm giving you. But in saying so, the message as well has been to say, how do you shine a spotlight on matters of justice in your small spaces, but within a national framework as well? And again, it has been a message that says, how do we make our rights real for all? How do we make our rights for all? So you have to start with yourselves here, but I'm going to come back to you as the student community to say, yes, we have that responsibility of making sure that the rights are real for all. But as he said at the back there, we have responsibilities. I also want to highlight that we also have a right, and as the student community, these are things that you have to speak about, especially the one I'm just about to mention, whilst you are here, so that by the time you leave this institution, you leave the institution with an agenda of saying, how do we honor our forerunners? How do we honor our forebearers of our common goals? And before we can honor ourselves as graduates that come from this university, the tendency is that we spend the 3 years, 4 years, 5 years here, maybe up to 7 years being here. And after that, we are just drowning in the honor and credentials that academia has given us and forget that these are meaningless. If you go to the book of Ecclesiastes, then it will tell you the story of living a life of beautiful things, but meaningless. So how do we make sure that we carry the beautiful things that we are going to obtain as graduates from this university, but in a meaningful way in the context of the things that we've heard here today? But another point is the challenge in terms of the challenges in terms of what I said. There is a challenge back to us whilst we are saying rights for all. I want to say rights for all are exercised meaningfully by a mind that is a patriotic mind. Whatever you do in exercising your right, in calling up your right, in demanding your right, if you cannot do that with a mind that is filled with the essence of patriotism, something is going to go wrong. So the message I'm sending as my remarks is, how do we love our countries despite everything that we are coming through and we are going through? How do we love our country? How do we make sure that, yes, we protest, but we protest with dignity? How do we make sure that we protest, but we protest with pride? How do we make sure that we protest, but we protest creating a legacy in instances where we have to protest? I think that is the message I am giving to the student leadership community here. But I also want to say, don't sell your souls. Don't sell your souls. In the speaker notes that we have received, I hope you have received that message very well. So I am saying to you, that is your lifetime guide. That's your lifetime star to say, in whatever I am doing, how do we make sure that I am not led by material gains, and in the process, I lose my soul? That has been the message, if you didn't hear it very well. So be true to yourself and be real to your neighbor. Be true to yourself despite whatever you are going to gain in this institution. Let the self remain and let respect remain. And that is the philosophy, if I can say, of Ubuntu. That is the philosophy of being a person in terms of why you are here. And I just want to say, do the little that you can do, and the next person will do the little that he or she can do, and that will build something that will be something that generations will reflect on. And I do want to move towards conclusion and say, let us not lose our foundation. Let us have dialogues that make us understand what is the human rights culture in South Africa. I think, Prof, as scholars, that is another chapter we just have to go deeper into. Because sometimes we speak of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a phenomenon that starts up in Africa and down in Africa. But what is Ubuntu in the South African context? And therefore, as I'm saying, researchers are here. What is human rights culture in the South African context? What are the common goals for our human rights? Are we clear on that? And finally, I want to say, I'm saying this because I want to lift the value of research in the context of what we are about here today, and remind yourselves to say, in everything that we are doing, when we are investing in yourselves, we are investing in freedom fighters for our democracy. And this is going to be an intergenerational thing. You may be saying, sometimes hear those that are of your age in my house, and they say, hey, you've done us under. And I say, but what is your role today? To make sure that those that will come after you will not also say, you've done us under. So I've heard that there are ambassadors here. This is the message of closing remarks that goes to the ambassadors here of human rights to say, we are here to drop a message, but we are here to say, craft an agenda on human rights that will be a legacy for this university. If it hasn't been done yesterday, make sure that you do it today so that you can leave a baton for the next generation, making sure that they know that this is the home of human rights. This is the home of democracy. And I'm saying this without repeating why I'm saying so, but if you reflect back on the foundations for this university, I take it you understand what I am saying. Finally, thank you very much. Tomorrow, we are celebrating those that are celebrating, because there are people celebrating because they say through this human rights bill, through this charter, through this constitution, I got freedom that my forebears never experienced. So for that reason, I am celebrating. But there are those that are saying, I am commemorating because the day of tomorrow, it's bringing to me some visions, missions that say there are things I have to remember for me to move forward. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Program Director, as well.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mandisa. Colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, that essentially concludes our lecture for today. However, I got two announcements, and good announcements. One is Professor Mapunya said that the students or the audience who ask questions, he got a book for them. So don't leave. He's got he's right here, but he can talk to that while I do the other announcement. And lunch is ready on the side here. So I think there's a lunch pack. So for those who've attended here, and we can move on it perhaps row by row, moving in from that side and to get your lunch packs. Thank you very much, and that concludes the lecture series. Thank you for your attendance. Oh, I've got one task to do still. I've got the gifts, hand over gifts.